In this video, I look at the medical issues to consider why your child may be a picky eater or refusing to eat. So from a medical perspective, there are two things that I consider. One, have there been any issues with feeding from birth or the introduction of solids? And two, did your child transition to solids well, then very slowly began to restrict their food choices? So I always ask parents, tell me your child's feeding history. And it's not unusual to hear, oh, he was a shocking feeder from the start, or he was fine until we started him on solids. So this history suggests that there may be some physical medical issue to consider. Something that is medically wrong from the start. It could be something as simple as poorly developed anatomy, which corrects itself over time, or a more serious issue that persists into the future. It may be something that feeding therapy will not help. You need to get a proper medical evaluation first. More commonly, I hear that they breastfed well and transitioned well to solids and ate everything, vegetables, all sorts of protein, fruit. Then slowly over time, they became pickier and pickier or restricted their eating to just some specific foods. In this case, we look at medical issues that could have possibly developed over time. Possibly reflux, allergy, constipation, gut inflammation, celiac disease. But also we looked at behavioural issues like avoidance behaviour that may have developed around food. So when parents are often given the advice, just let them go hungry, eventually they will eat. Well, no, in these first two cases, there is something clearly wrong and needs to be investigated further. If they breastfed well and ate everything initially, then yes, that may be advisable, so long as there is no other underlying issues like constipation, allergies and intolerances, perhaps gut pathologies like reflux and so forth. So most people view the gut as, this is where you put the food in, this is where the waste comes out, and because you can't see anything in between, something magical happens. But what happens when things go wrong? And they do. Especially in non-verbal children, where there may be pain, nausea or discomfort. They may end up not eating, and they may also show signs of aggression or self-injurious behaviour because they can't communicate in any other way. The gut is a highly complex set of organs, a highly sophisticated biochemical factory. And it's amazing the rubbish that we put into it, and it still manages to protect us and keep us alive. Look, no matter how much we abuse it. And the bacteria in your child's gut has more of an effect on your child's brain than you realise. That is why we're hearing more and more about this gut-brain axis relationship. And research by Tim Buey, who's a paediatric gastroenterologist, and Arthur Krigsman, who's also a gastroenterologist. Both of these gastroenterologists have actually done a lot of research into autistic children and their gut issues. And they say that at least half of all children with autism spectrum disorders have clinically significant gastrointestinal symptoms. That's not insignificant. That's a lot of children. So what can go wrong in this mysterious gut area between your mouth and the anus? Well, in the esophagus, the tube leading into the stomach, you can have inflammation like eosinophilic esophagitis or reflux. In the stomach, there can also be inflammation like gastritis. In the small intestine, a lot can go wrong, like small bowel disease or enzyme deficiencies. In the large intestine, there are many inflammatory bowel conditions that have been reported in children on the autism spectrum. And let's not forget constipation or loose stools. Both of these are actually very common issues in autistic children. And research into gut bacteria is clearly showing that children on the autism spectrum have a lower diversity and more harmful bacteria in the bowels. Everything from yeast overgrowth, pathogenic bacteria to parasites. Often, it all manifests as pain or discomfort. But how would you know in a non-verbal autistic child? Possibly by a refusal to eat or challenging behaviours. Tongue tie can limit a child's ability to move food around in their mouth and swallow. Mouth ulcers. Now, mouth ulcers can also be an indication of more serious gut inflammatory conditions. Enlarged tonsils. And if not already done, it is important to conduct a thorough dental exam to check teeth for cavities, and gums for infection, and other abnormalities as well. So these problems may sometimes be hidden, causing your child pain and leading to eating and feeding difficulties. So if there's dysphagia, now that is just a fancy name for problems with swallowing. So like these enlarged tonsils, your child is not going to be happy trying to get food through there. So there's only one way for it to go, and it's going to come out. Or with tongue tie. Children are checked for this condition when they are born, but I have found 2 children in the last year that needed to have their tongue tie snipped. Never assume anything, always check. And you can see how much freer the tongue is to be able to move food around in the mouth after the tongue tie has actually been corrected. And this may include improving speech as well. And historical clues that might suggest gut dysfunction, difficulty breastfeeding, persistent colic, reflux as a child or food sensitivities, failure to thrive, a history of frequent antibiotics, abnormal posturing because they've got abdominal pain and they're putting pressure on their tummy to try and get some relief from that pain. Hands in pants probing, that might be due to yeast overgrowth or Clostridia overgrowth in the bowel. Self-injurious behaviour or aggression in children, especially in the non-verbal children. And poor sleep, so if they've got abdominal discomfort or reflux, that will wake them up. And physical clues, abnormal growth, abdominal stools like diarrhea or constipation, behavioural changes after eating, teeth grinding, possibly due to parasites, and gastroscopy or colonoscopy. So gastroscopy is when they go down the mouth and have a look into the stomach, and colonoscopy is when they go from the bottom up looking into the large intestine. And there is a whole host of inflammatory gut conditions that have been reported in autistic children. They are not rare, they are just not checked for. And constipation. Think of constipation as a blocked sink. The more blocked it becomes, the less you can get through that drain. In this particular case, the abdominal x-ray actually shows that the rectum is quite enlarged due to the amount of constipation that's actually in there. It just let them go hungry. They will eat eventually. Well, not in this case. They're blocked up. You need actually to unblock them first and get them comfortable before they will actually eat. Diarrhea or loose stools. Look, this is not a happy child. They may possibly have parasites, pathogenic bacteria, or intolerances to certain foods like milk or lactose in milk. So there's a whole host of gastrointestinal investigations can actually be done. Everything from blood work to a physical exam to check that they haven't got an anal fissure, to possibly doing an abdominal x-ray to see how severe the constipation may be, to doing some stool testing to look for inflammatory markers and abnormal bacteria within the stool that might be causing a problem, and possibly doing a gastroscopy or a colonoscopy as well. And food allergies or food intolerances. Let me tell you a story from personal experience. My oldest daughter, when she was younger, she wouldn't eat fish. Picky eater, right? Well, that's how I thought. So I would get firmer textured fish like rockling, crummet, and tell her it was chicken. Or kept just try and give it to her in different ways. And yet, this is pretty much the reaction that I got every single time. Then when she was about 8 years old, she said, "My lips tingle." Well, there's a red flag. She actually had an allergy to fish. And even today, now that she's an adult, that allergy is quite severe. She will have an anaphylactic response to fish requiring an EpiPen. So when a parent tells me that their child will refuse one particular food or a food group, like dairy or fish, I don't automatically dismiss it as picky eating. They may indeed have an allergy to that particular food. I was lucky that my daughter could tell me, although unfortunately I missed the clues, but I'm a lot smarter now. But if she was non-verbal or had an intellectual disability, how would I know, or how would you know? My daughter knew years before developing her fish allergy that fish did not agree with her. But Dad kept forcing it onto her, and she can thank me now for giving her a very severe fish allergy. So we need to have a good look at what specific foods are being avoided. Now let's not forget about medications. Medication like for ADHD, the stimulants and the antipsychotics, they can have an effect on appetite and hunger as well. And mitochondrial dysfunction, which I'm not going to go into in detail here, but there's a higher incidence of mitochondrial dysfunction in autism and also epilepsy as well. So mitochondria are the powerhouses of the cells, giving the muscles energy and so forth. So any issue with the mitochondria may cause weak oral motor muscles. And the child will be unable to chew properly and possibly swallow as well. Cravings for specific foods. Often yeast. If there's a yeast overgrowth, there will be cravings for refined carbohydrates. And if you put yeast and sugar from refined carbohydrates together, what do you get? You get aldehydes and you get alcohol. And that alcohol will actually go to the brain and will affect the brain as well. So gluten, dairy, sugar, processed foods, they're all addictive. And they're addictive through different mechanisms as well. And children often crave the very foods that they are addicted to or are reacting to. Pretty much to the exclusion of a lot of other foods. And if they have sensory issues around eating, there may be textures, tastes, smells, or even the noise of eating if they're eating crunchy foods. And if this is the case, you need to have a professional evaluation to check for this. And nutritional deficiencies as well. How often does the pediatrician check for nutritional deficiencies? Well, in my experience, rarely. If you're having blood work done to check your child for genetic abnormalities like Fragile X, then why wouldn't you check them at the same time for nutritional deficiencies, if at the very least you get a baseline? And I don't know where I got this quote from, but it just seems to be so true with autistic children. Because there's no medical standard of care for autism, doctors don't have to investigate anything. They can write it into a folder, file it away, and not look at it again. And that's not right. We're talking about human beings who deserve the same level of medical care as everyone else. So there's a lot to be considered from a medical perspective with children that are picky or restricted eaters. And how often are children actually assessed to see if they do in fact have an underlying issue? Well, it seems to be rarely. And why? Because parents are told it's just part of the autism spectrum. Well, it's not. If your child does have feeding issues, find someone that will actually listen to you. Someone that will ask all the right questions about your child. If you don't ask the right questions, you won't get the right answers. Find someone that will actually check for underlying medical issues or nutritional issues or even behavioural issues as well. And so as we continue on this journey next time, we will actually look at when parents need to be concerned that their child is a picky eater, or whether it's actually gone past the point of picky eating and has become a more serious issue. As usual, I encourage you to leave your comments below and please share to get the message out there, especially to the parents that are struggling every day with their children. And thank you very much for watching.